The movie starts in a school where Mallory soon bumps into a gang of 3 girls led by Nanita. Nanita accuses Mallory of reporting her to a teacher, but Mallory defends herself, saying she only answered a teacher's question and she would be more careful next time. However, Nanita is not having any of this as she seems really pissed and just wants to get back at Mallory. To avoid trouble, Mallory runs away and reaches a bridge surrounded by water. There, Nanita calls Mallory different names and suddenly pushes her to the ground. She then talks about fighting Mallory, and when Mallory stands up, it doesn't take long before she's met with a punch to her face, with blood soon dripping out of Mallory's nose. The sight of Mallory in pain seems to be good stuff for Nanita and her girls, with Nanita then taking a phone and filming Mallory. She also insults Mallory, spits on her, and tells her to go back to the United States. Nanita soon posts the video and announces it, even saying that people were already watching it. Mallory remains hurt on the ground but doesn't try to retaliate until Nanita says something about Mallory, after which she turns her back to leave. Before she can go far though, Mallory picks up something and hits Nanita with it, but she's unable to do more than that before a man comes over to stop her. Later on, Mallory leaves the police station with her uncle Tommy, who first stays mute before he says things weren't looking good for her, though Mallory tries to defend herself, saying Nanita had beaten her first. When they get home, Tommy receives a call that Mallory has been kicked out of school, and he tells her. However, she doesn't say anything and continues to stare at the bottle of pills and wine on the table. Before he leaves the room though, Tommy tells Mallory she's got to try and fit in even though they're in a different country, but it's not like she's paying attention. As he leaves, she takes out all the pills from the pill bottle and swallows it all, after which she heads outside. It doesn't take long for her to lose consciousness after walking a few steps. An ambulance is able to get her to the hospital in no time, and there, the doctor tells Tommy that she's fine and there's no serious problem with her. Tommy then goes over to wake her up, telling her she gave him a scare. When she's discharged, Mallory and Tommy then head over to a judge with their lawyer. There, the judge sentences Mallory to 2 years in a correctional facility, also mentioning that it was a fair judgment even though Mallory would still have to pay a huge fine. As there's nothing else to do, they head home for Mallory to pack her things, and then Tommy drives her over to prison. When they go in, a lady named Sky takes them to see the warden. When they eventually meet the warden, she talks about how well they'd treat Mallory and that she'd be safe and well taken care of without even having the feeling of being in prison. When she's done with her speech, she asks Mallory to say her goodbyes to Tommy outside and then get ready to be taken in. Mallory cries while saying goodbye, and Tommy tells her he'd try everything to get her out, while also making sure to always reach out to her. When Tommy leaves, Sky takes Mallory into the prison, and the cells don't look pleasing to Mallory, and the inmates also do not look well, but Sky says it's all normal. Sky then takes her out to a spot on the outside where the inmates are hanging around. It doesn't take long before an inmate named Riz catches the sight of Mallory and immediately harasses her, even telling her she could do nothing. However, another inmate named Belle comes to Mallory's rescue, but when she thanks her, Belle doesn't seem too impressed. Just then, Sky takes Mallory to her cell accompanied by a guard, and there, Sky asks Mallory to take off her clothes and change into the prison wear, and even though she's shy about it, one of her cellmates named Kat tells Mallory not to be. When Mallory is done, Sky gives her a rundown of her schedule and leaves with the guard. Kat then asks Mallory what she's in for, and when Mallory tells her, she sounds interested. However, when Mallory asks Kat about why she's in prison, she answers furiously, telling Mallory to mind her business. The time for lunch soon arrives and the ladies have to head out. When she's done receiving her meal, Kat invites Mallory to sit with her, and as she does, Riz can't help but stare. Kat then tells Mallory that Riz had killed her whole family and a cat, and that's why she's in prison. Mallory is beyond shocked, and just then, Kat tells her the prison system is rigged with corruption, and there's even fight nights where they put inmates against each other just for the fun of it. Soon after, Riz comes over to where the ladies are and then harasses Mallory again, but Kat stands up for her and a guard has to stop them before a fight starts. Kat then tells Mallory that she'd have to learn to defend herself and fight. Mallory then talks about calling Tommy, and Kat tells her to be careful because the calls are monitored. When she connects with Tommy, she asks that he does something to get her out and he says he will. However, they're not able to talk for long before a guard says the time is up. Mallory is then taken to see the warden, who instructs her to sign some documents. As it's in a language she doesn't understand, Mallory hesitates and says she wants to call Tommy or her lawyer. But the warden insists it's nothing serious and if she didn't sign it, her sentence won't be counted until she signed it, so Mallory puts down her signature. The next day, Sky comes to get Mallory and tells her she has to start working. Mallory ends up choosing the option to scrub floors. During her duty, Riz happens to be there, and again, she makes sure to cause trouble with Mallory, and this time, she punches her in the face, swelling her eye. Not long after, Kat sees the injury on Mallory's face and immediately suspects Riz, and even though Mallory tries to keep her from fighting, Kat gets into a fight with Riz, with the warden coming over to the scene, asking the guards to take them to the cages, while looking at Mallory strangely. Later that night, Kat is brought back to her cell looking really broken. Mallory protests to the warden about the brutal treatment, but all she gets is a serious warning to never tell anyone about what was happening inside the prison. She also then tells Mallory that she has to learn how to fight. And almost immediately, she calls one of Mallory's cellmates and asks them to fight. Though Mallory looks confused as to what was happening, she receives a punch. And the warden then tells her to toughen up and start training, saying she already fixed Mallory's first fight in 2 weeks, much to Mallory's surprise. With this, Mallory meets with Belle in the gym on the next day and asks that Belle help her with training. Belle doesn't exactly give her a positive answer, but then gives Mallory a condition she had to fulfill before accepting to train her. The task is too hard for Mallory, and she seems to give up, though she then tries to mimic Belle's moves, after which she leaves the gym furiously. As she looks pissed, Mallory goes to make a call, and even though a guard tells her she can't, Skye comes to help, but warns her about reporting the warden. Mallory is able to make the call, but she can't say much because Skye is watching her. Tommy tells Mallory that he had not been allowed to see her, saying he was told that she had signed off her visiting rights. Mallory immediately understands what the warden made her sign, but she can't tell him anything. Just as Tommy is telling Mallory he'll do everything he can to get her out, Skye ends the call and takes her to the basement, where she is asked to take off her clothes. Mallory is shocked to hear this, and when she doesn't take it off, a guard hits her, so she has to do as she's told. Soon after, the warden comes in and tells Mallory that they know that her dad is a wealthy man, but he's refusing to pay what she's asking for, and as such, Mallory will be punished. Mallory pleads that she'll get the warden the money, but the warden doesn't seem interested, then instructing the guards to commit a disgusting non-consensual act with her. When they're done, the warden tells her it was only a lesson and more would come as long as she didn't get the money. Skye then leads Mallory to have a shower, and there, Mallory tries to hang herself, but her attempt is not good enough and Skye finds her when she falls to the ground. Mallory is then taken to a cell where the warden comes over and scares her, also mentioning that her big fight was just a week away, and she needed to train well. Soon after, Kat starts helping Mallory with training. While they're at it, they get caught up in the moment and eventually head over to a room where they make out. When they're done, Kat talks about how her ex-boyfriend had got her in trouble and led her to prison, and Mallory offers her comforting words. They then leave and Kat continues helping Mallory with her training. Mallory continues to get better, and even Belle sees this and commends her in the gym. Later on, while Kat is helping Mallory again, the warden comes over and tells Mallory that since she's now strong, it was time to set up an exhibition fight before her big fight. Mallory says she's not ready, but there's nothing she can do, as she's taken over to where the fight will be held. Surprisingly, her opponent is Nanita, who has somehow ended up in prison, and Mallory now looks interested in the fight. They both exchange tough blows, with Nanita doing particularly well to beat Mallory. However, Mallory suddenly overpowers her and beats her up until she's almost unconscious. The warden, who had been watching the fight, seems to enjoy the show along with one of the guards filming behind her. The next day, when Mallory is summoned by the warden and in her office, the warden commends Mallory on her victory, saying the fight got a lot of views and people really like her. She also then tells Mallory that her uncle managed to pay someone that could get him to visit, and she needed Mallory to not mention anything about the prison, threatening that she'd have Tommy killed. She also tells Mallory that Tommy either pays for her freedom or she puts Mallory against Riz in a fight for her freedom, and Mallory accepts the latter. She then proceeds to see Tommy, who looks a little terrified to see Mallory with bruises. He asks how she's doing, but she can't really say much with Skye right behind her. Tommy then tells Mallory to call her dad since he was powerful enough to pull some strings and get her out, saying he had tried but he didn't listen. Mallory doesn't agree with this, even insulting her father, before she then storms out. Later on, when she's training in the gym, the warden comes over to revoke her gym privileges, and Mallory doesn't seem to understand this. She, however, leaves and continues her training inside her cell, with Kat saying the warden wanted her to lose the fight. The next day, when Riz is using the gym, the warden comes in and has Riz injected with a supplement, after which she tells Riz to kill Mallory during the fight, also for her freedom. Elsewhere, Belle gives Mallory some advice, saying she needed to have a strong mind to be able to beat Riz. When it's time for lunch, the guards stop Mallory from getting served, and they also stop her from sharing with Kat too. Later in the night, as she's hungry, Mallory has to make do with a rat squeaking in their cell, though Kat doesn't like the sight of this. Fight night soon arrives, and the warden tells both fighters that only one of them would be left because one of them had to kill the other. Kat, Belle, and a couple of other inmates are there to watch, as well as a guard who is to film the fight. The fight soon starts, and both ladies show off their strengths by beating each other, though Mallory is able to later beat Riz to the ground. The warden then asks Mallory to finish off Riz, but Mallory hesitates and yells at the warden, who then says she can make things a lot easier for Mallory and hands her a knife. Mallory picks up Riz and attempts to slit her throat, but instead she distracts the warden and her guards, and then finally gets a hold of the warden, threatening to kill her if the guards shoot. The warden still doesn't give up and tries to yell at Mallory, but Mallory stabs her and then asks the guards to drop their guns and hand them over to Kat, while she also takes one. With that, the ladies are able to head out, with the warden still with Mallory and the guards unable to do anything as Kat has a gun pointed at them. When they get outside, Kat retrieves the keys to the warden's car and goes to get it, while Mallory hands over the warden to Riz and some of the other inmates, who immediately start beating her as she pleads for mercy. Kat soon pulls up with the car and Mallory hops in, telling Kat she needed to head for the US Embassy, and then Kat drives away. And that is how